has left its policy rate unchanged at 28%, while noting that the current level of inflation remains high relative to the medium-term target and will require maintaining the tight stance to reinforce the disinflation process. Meanwhile, the cash reserve ratio for all banks will now be maintained in their respective currencies. Richmond Frimpong, Advisory Board Chair at FLF Africa, joins me for more on the economic impact of this move. Richmond, thank you for taking the time out to join us today.
Thank you, Esther.
Quickly, let's start with your response to, or just perhaps two of your key takeaways from the meeting before we go into some specifics.
Right, so you can tell the policy direction of this new governor on the monetary policy stance. In addition to managing the structural macros and also to cash in on the external flippages, they are basically making sure that they are taming inflation on the disinflation path, and also to be careful not to disrupt the very fragile growth that the economy is uptaking.
And I wanted you to react to this announcement that was also made at the meeting that the cash reserve ratio for all banks will be maintained in their respective currencies. What do you make of that?
I think it's a masterstroke. It's a very good thing to do, particularly when you want to tighten the liquidity framework. And I mean, what else could they do? I mean, to take advantage of that framework was good, so that there is no pressure that crowds out the leverages they are making on the forex side, and at the same time able to manage the new disinflation targeting they are looking forward to achieving.
Let's quickly talk about the CD. I mean, the BOJ was quite pleased by the performance of the CD so far. As of May 20 this year, the CD has appreciated by 21.5%, and that's a far cry from the 19.2% drop we saw in 2024. And he did also attribute the fact that he did mention that the CD's recent appreciation or performance is not exactly tied to the central bank's interventions, but from remittances and all of that. Do you share that sentiment?
It's a mixed bag. But largely you can tell that the supply side has improved, and also there's a very good signal of the difficulties that the external sector is facing. Here, I'm talking about the exogenous factors on the currency of the USD. And the government of Ghana is cashing in. Prices of cocoa is also bringing some good inflows. And with the tranches of the IMF program, there is no pressure on the supply side. And with the gold reserves coming in, they are just cashing in and making sure that it gives them some leverage in terms of the forex pricing.
I also wanted you to react to some of the comments the governor made about the fiscal spending, the fiscal space as it is right now. He says there's more fiscal discipline compared to the overspending or large spending from previous times. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree that there is more fiscal discipline now?
Yes and no. It's too early to test fiscal discipline. I mean, budget approved, appropriation is still ongoing. The next tranche was just signed off with the IMF. And so the government has not really been tested in terms of its fiscal discipline. But the good thing is that there has been a policy tone, and that policy tone of discipline, that policy tone of not allowing fiscal flippages is good. But we are yet to check beyond the next quarter to see if this expenditure side can be contained, and most importantly, the revenue mobilization anchor can be ticked in. If that happens, then we can say yes, but it's too early to call.
But it's quite clear that the Ghanaian economy has turned a corner. I've just looking at some of the macro indicators. For instance, trade surplus for the first 4 months of this year, 41 billion or $4.1 billion, current account surplus of 2.12 billion in Q1. So it looks like obviously major macro indicators, well, perhaps with the exception of inflation, are looking on the bright side. Would you be reviewing your forecast for growth this year for the economy, or you also take a cautious stance and see how things play out?
I think cautiously optimistic about growth uptick. Really, we can tell from the next quarter if all the macro headlines are going to still follow the path they are following. But it's a good start. too early to call, but it's a very good start. Let's see how the market turns and responds to the macros given the next quarter, and we'll be back to tell whether we are good on a good ride or no. We have to pay attention to some of the flippages.
Now, while the monetary policy rate at 28% has been able to, to a large extent, help to curb inflation, stabilize the economy, it's still a tricky one for the fiscal authorities who need businesses to be able to lend at a more affordable rates and also, create jobs, expand the economy as a whole, especially for small businesses. How would both sides, the fiscal and the monetary authorities, balance in this act of trying to grow the economy by reducing interest rates and allowing businesses, especially small businesses, to grow?
I think on the fiscal side, it's straightforward. The government needs to keep the fiscal tightening so that we do not crowd out the private sector. If you look at the Treasury bill pricing, it has almost like halved, and that is good, so that the banks now can be able to give funds out. Now, complementarily, you see that the monetary policy framework is also matching up. So they stay the policy rate just so that to be careful. And then most importantly, they now say that the reserve ratio is kept at the currency of deposit. That is very good, so that it brings up the possibility of bringing a lot of funding at a very good rate to the private sector to push development and growth. So I think it's working in tandem at this moment quite well. And then it's good they stayed the policy rate so that inflation is tamed, and at the same time, the cost of credit is also easy for the private sector.
And speaking about inflation, Fitch also put out their forecast for inflation in the near term, and they say that they're expecting inflation to ease to 18.8% this year. I guess that's a long-term view, and projected to fall to an average of 15.2% in 2026. But this is still, obviously, not too close to the Bank of Ghana's target of single digit. So is there still a long road ahead for the monetary authorities in getting inflation back into that projected bracket?
Actually, that is a yes. That is why even the Bank of Ghana, in announcing the stay of the policy, the rates, they indicated that they are going to be revising to just about 11.9 at the end of the year in terms of their projection. That means averagely they are looking at about 12, and that is still high, further away from the original projections they made. Inflation is so tricky. The government hasn't really stepped up in its spending, and so you cannot really be so sure about inflation. That is why they were extremely careful with the policy rate, and they did not just dip it down by any basis point, but stayed it.
All right, Richmond, thank you so much for talking to us today. We appreciate your time on the show. That was Richmond Frimpong, Advisory Board Chair at FLF Africa.